Good evening, you're watching Estuary News. I'm Hugh Riches. Coming up tonight, we'll have a roundup of the latest news headlines and all the latest sporting action ahead of the weekend. And I'll be reviewing the week's regional papers with my guest, Lord Norton of Louth. There's been a sharp increase in child protection referrals across Yorkshire and the Humber. Findings from the children's charity, the NSPCC, have shown that over 400 referrals were made last year of children being affected by domestic abuse. That's an increase of 28% from 2015. The charity received more than 4,000 calls from adults with concerns about children's welfare. A Hull-born figure has been honoured in his home city today. Ron Deering was born and educated in the city and went on to become a senior civil servant and chairman of the post office. He was honoured with a centenary plaque. The initiative aims to recognise individuals who've made significant achievements for the benefit of the city. And we'll have more on that story in Monday's news. The NHS Lincoln Walk-in Centre is set to close. The Lincolnshire West Clinical Commissioning Group will close the centre early next year. More than 6,000 signatures were put on a petition urging health bosses to reconsider the decision. Over 36,000 people use the service annually, and it's been open since 2009. Hull will be split in two tonight. The River Hull will separate east from west to celebrate the City of Culture. All 13 bridges will be lifted at just after 8:15. That is 2017. They'll be closed for 1 minute to emphasise the vital role they play in the city's everyday life. The event will culminate with a specially commissioned performance at Stage at the Dock. There has been a fall in the number of road casualties across North Lincolnshire. Figures from the North Lincolnshire Road Safety Partnership have revealed that 36 fewer fatalities were recorded between January and August than in the same time in 2016. The figures show that the partnership is on target to achieve road casualty numbers significantly lower than their target for 2017 of 666. That's not what they were aiming for, they just wanted to bring it down. There's set to be a Caribbean Carnival in Scunthorpe. The Arts Weekend will include Caribbean music and the latest carnival dance and costumes. The 2021 Visual Arts Centre will host a carnival play where people can be creative through making and moving to the colours and sounds of the West Indies. The three-day event takes place from Thursday the 28th of September. Time now to have a look through the region's papers with my guest Philip Norton, Lord Norton of Louth, Professor of Government at Hull University. Philip, welcome. Thank you very much for coming in. And you can see more of Lord Norton on Monday's Hot Topic and get much more of this rather brilliant political brain. Anyway, Philip, we're talking about local news here. What have you found? Well, a parliamentary story, appropriately enough.
Indeed. Well, it's local newspapers, but a national story, and one or two of that nature. The Grimsby Telegraph reporting the problems raised by the fact that Parliament sits for 2 weeks in September, then rises for 3 weeks because of the party conferences, and the 2-week session is rather costly because everything's got to be prepared. Because during the summer, when Parliament's not sitting, quite a lot of work has to go on within the palace because it's ageing. Just keeping up is
we all know that the thing's falling over, isn't it?
The infrastructure is really decaying. We can't sustain it. We really do need to move out while the whole place is redone. But in the meantime, just keeping it up is extraordinarily expensive. So, I think it's generally well known. Big Ben's been silenced. If you look at the palace, there's massive scaffolding outside and all around different aspects. So it's very expensive. Just maintaining it, keeping it going, although even that I think is a losing battle. So that a lot of work has to be done during the summer. That's got to stop. Everything's got to be put back in place while the two houses meet. And then we rise for 3 weeks, so they can get on with a bit of work. But actually just those 2 weeks, it costs over £1 million just putting everything back in place. So there is an issue of, is that really a sensible way of using parliamentary time? Should we reconfigure the year, not necessarily lose the number of days we sit, but have them at a different time? Because we don't want Parliament to rise for too long, because we've got jobs to do, scrutinise the government. So we want to carry on sitting the same number of days, possibly even more. But do you get rid of the conference season and perhaps move the conferences to some other time so we have more continuous sitting? So this is a constant issue, overlaid by the fact we've still got to have a vote on whether we should decant the palace for 6 or 7 years.
Where would you go? Where would you, as a member of the upper house of Parliament, where would you choose to go? Presumably Hull.
Well, we don't have.
Louth.
Well, we don't have to choose. That's the easy bit. We know where it'd be going. They're going to have a special chamber for the Commons in Richmond House, which is just along Whitehall, basically, on Palm Street, and the Lords would move into the QE2 Centre, which doesn't have quite the grandeur of the Palace of Westminster, but it's probably necessary so that they can actually get on with the work. That's the cheapest option. It's got to be extraordinarily expensive, whatever we do.
The historically pleasing option would be if you would go and sit in the Natural History Museum, which was built as an alternative design for a parliament after the fire of 1834.
Indeed, there are all sorts of potential, including innovative ideas like having some floating parliament on the Thames. Well, it's a nice idea. There are the security people have, I think, put a stop to that. But there are all sorts of possibilities. But we are limited now because of space in Westminster, the available, where we can go. People say, oh, well, why not move out of London? Let's all go to Hull or somewhere like that, which is fine for Parliament, but Parliament's in London because government's in London. So if you move Parliament, you've got to move government, and that means all the, certainly the mandarins, the 20-odd civil servants, and then all the support staff for government, for Parliament. It's actually quite a massive operation. We don't have space in Hull. Nice though it'd be to have Parliament there.
That's enough about your workplace.
Indeed, yes.
One of your workplaces. Skegness Standard next.
Well, it's still on, in effect, a national issue because the Skegness Standard was reporting on the fact that the resort had actually for a while seen armed police officers patrolling, which reflects, I'm afraid, current conditions. So we're going to see much more of this. So it's not just Skegness, but for people in the resort, of course, it's quite a shock. You see police officers walking around with machine guns, which you're not used to.
As it should be. We're English. We do not have an armed police force.
No, we don't.
And to have machine guns, automatic weapons, it's like some sort of South American tin pot dictatorship.
Well, and there was a poll I see where more police officers think they should be armed. It's still a minority, but it's an increasing...
I've heard senior officers commenting this week saying that within 10 years we will have an armed force.
Well, and certainly we're having a position where we do have armed police variously on the street. You've got armed officers on patrol ready for instances, and for Skegness this was exceptional. For some of us, because within Parliament, we're used to having lots of armed police officers around, but you are seeing it in our cities. I was travelling back up from London this morning. There are armed police officers on the platform at Doncaster Station, not unsurprisingly as a transport hub. Yeah. So we are seeing more of it. So people start, once you get used to it, but initially it's quite a shock.
Were you in the Palace of Westminster when it was attacked earlier this year?
Yes, in the March one. Yes, we're in shutdown for quite a period, well, for about 5 hours. It's quite fortuitous from my point of view, because each semester I've got students on placement at Westminster. I also bring my students down on a Westminster trip each year, which is normally on a Wednesday. And if I'd followed the usual pattern, I've had a whole lot of students there that afternoon who've been caught up in it. This year I changed the day. We'd actually gone down the day before. So I was the only one caught up in it. Otherwise it would have been quite enormous problems, because we'd had a whole group of students just locked down and none of the program would arrange would be able to go on and so on. So yes, it was quite a fraught time in just following, and then of course the consequences since in rethinking security. How do you deal with that sort of situation? Not just in terms of protecting the palace, but alerting people to what's going on, communicating.
I think that you can generalise it across the whole country. With this year of terrorist attacks, and we are going to see an awful lot more security on the streets, and very much more obviously as well.
Oh, absolutely. You've got the nature of the problem, because you've got obviously known targets, like iconic targets, the Palace of Westminster, places like that, so we know what that needs to be secured. And then of course you've got random attacks, which is much more difficult, which is why we've got to have armed officers at different spots up and down the country, transport hubs, things like that, for totally understandable reasons.
So it's very quickly a more cheerful story here, I think.
Well, I'm not sure it is.
No, it's not really,
It's more of a heavyweight story, so to speak. It's both the Hull Daily Mail, but also the Bridlington Free Press, covering East Yorkshire in terms of the fact that the proportion of overweight adults in the area is not only large, it's actually above the national average. So we do have a national problem in terms of obesity, but it's even worse in the East Riding.
So who's responsible? I think the fat people are responsible for their own. We're all sovereign over our own bodies, but who is it? The food companies, food manufacturers, the retailers? Is it the labelling?
Well, I suppose the short answer is yes, because the range of people you could say are responsible. You've got the issue as well of who's responsible for dealing with it. Do you just say, well, it's individuals must make their own choice, leave it to it? Do you have an educational campaign, so alerting people, so what they really ought to know? Do you actually be more authoritarian in some sort of regime that imposes limits, say, or a tax on fizzy drinks, or you limit the amount of sugar in products, things like that? How far should you go? Or should you just say to people, look, this is sensible eating. At the end of the day, it's up to you. It's your decision. But of course, those decisions have costs in terms of there is a public expense if people are overweight.
To the NHS, of course.
Yes, yeah.
My dinner tonight will be bacon and eggs, on which note we're going to have to stop for a moment for a break. Join me after the break when we'll continue to talk about the regional papers. And of course, Dan will have all the sports news ahead of the weekend. Welcome back. You're watching Estuary News. Still to come tonight, all the latest sports news from Dan. And still with me in the studio reviewing the local papers, Norton of Louth, Philip Norton, Professor of Government at Hull University. We were just talking about the fact that people in Yorkshire are too big.
Yes, there's an obesity problem which is national, but in East Yorkshire, the number of people regarded as obese is actually above the national average.
What is it about Yorkshire particularly then? Do you think is it just too many? It's Yorkshire puddings, isn't it?
Well, I suspect it's to do with the diet, but it may also be lack of exercise. But I mean, it's a wonderful area for getting exercise. So I suspect it's some of the food that people consume. And the sort of things people do tend to consume, high in calories, but also high in carbohydrates. So if you're a great cake eater, you've got a problem. A brisk walk is a solution to all sorts of health problems. Yes, but the best way is actually to cut down on what you're eating. Well, I'll advocate the brisk walk because it's very good for the mind as well. It's very calming it's a combination. You eat less, or you eat less of what's bad for you, and also particularly a brisk walk is especially healthy. Not, as you say, it's not only for the physical aspects of the body, but for the mind as well. It's a form of well-being. It's very valuable. Now, next story. I think this is literally from your fief. Well, it is, but it's just an example of what's happening in different parts of the country. It just happens to be there's developments in the Louth area, but you're seeing it in East Yorkshire as well, and that is the development of local railway. This is in the Louth Leader, I think, isn't it? Yes, it's this in Louth Leader, and it's the development of the Wolds Railway, so the further development there. Ideally in the fullness of time, developing the link between Louth and Tetney, but this is extending the line just beyond Ludborough. I say we're seeing something similar in East Yorkshire, so there is this move to restore railway lines, because some of us are old enough to remember the beaching cuts, and the extent to which local lines like this were cut, I think very regrettably. So it's just a slight restoration of some of the lines where you've still got the availability of the line. Of course, so many have been built on, you can't restore them. But there is some development. There's no question of this being sort of restoring the transport infrastructure. No. This is sort of hobby railways for enthusiasts. Yes, because it's not to link up with anywhere. So it is, they say, the local enthusiasts. In terms of the railway infrastructure, though, here in Lincolnshire, and we're in Grimsby, I don't know how you get back and forth from Westminster, but that little putt-putt train from Grimsby as far as Doncaster and then across the Transpennine to Press. It is the most frustrating vehicle to be on, as it never gets above first gear, and you can just feel urging it on, and it travels at about 3 miles an hour. Yes, but these things are relative. At least there is a train. Whereas you think about particularly most of Lincolnshire, yes, that there is no rail infrastructure anymore. So you get railway lines on the north and the south of the county, sort of covering the county. Of course, you've got the main East Coast line, which runs along the west coast of the west side of the county. You've got, as you say, the line on the northern bank,
the
north
south
of the
bank coming across to
well,
Grimsby,
it's the
to
south
Cleethorpes.
bank of the Humber, and then of course the north bank linked to Doncaster, and of course the train goes along and then down, so it's really covering the edge of the county. You get to the heart of the county. If you've not got a car, you're in problem if you want to get from A to B.
There is a sort of southwest northeast line from Grimsby to Lincoln, but that again, I mean, that's more about, that's very lovely views, but I wouldn't want to do that every day. That's a very exhausting trip.
Between there and the south of the county, where you've got the line running up to round by Boston up Skegness. And Lincolnshire is a very big county.
Yep.
So you've got these local roads, which I think is jolly good. As you say, it's not part of the national infrastructure, it's just isolated cases. But you're getting up and down the country, and I think that's a good thing. So it's good news because you're getting local enthusiasts involved. It's something that people enjoy. And so you get the contrast between that sort of a local activity and then the other sort of activity, which is the social problem. We've touched upon obesity. But the other big issue in our towns and cities. So you get most of our local newspapers reporting it. There's one here, this is the Grimsby Telegraph, about a big police drugs raid, but you get the other papers reporting on similar events as well. And just the consequences, the social impact of it in terms of drug use, the criminality, and of course to the public purse in terms of the amount of police time it takes up, the proportion of police time taken up by dealing with drugs.
And the spending on imprisoning people.
Oh,
which
absolutely.
Is an enormously
Yes,
costly activity to do, to lock people up.
Yes, and it doesn't actually stop them taking drugs. If anything, it exacerbates the problem.
I noticed Prince William asking, certainly not answering a question the other day at a drug rehabilitation unit, saying maybe it's time to, well, he was asking, and he wasn't making policy, but maybe it's time to legalise drugs.
Well, it's a question that's important, and I think he did a service in actually asking it, in thinking about it. I'm actually involved in an all-party group in Parliament that is concerned to look at drugs policy. My argument's always been not necessarily we should change it, but we should review it on the basis of evidence, because people just tend to say, oh, no, keep it as it is. Yes, but why? What's the evidence based? What's the evidence base for what we're doing? What are the costs? Let's weigh the options rather than just sticking with what we've got. Are we actually tackling the problem effectively, or are we just dealing with a small part of it? And we can look elsewhere, places like Portugal that have legalised drugs, and of course some parts of the United States now doing it.
Legalised what we would call soft drugs.
Oh, soft, yes.
Not cocaine and heroin and things like that.
No, but whether we regulate that would be another issue. And we can see the human cost, not just in this country, but of course even more severe in the countries that produce the drugs. I mean, the number of deaths, the battles between drug cartels, things like that, absolutely horrendous. So there's a case for actually reviewing it. Let's visit the evidence and decide it on, let's have policy that is evidence-based, which I think should apply generally to public policy.
Well, it sounds like the sort of thing that one would hope might be done by a wise and sensible parliament, Philip.
Well, some of us actually have initiated debates on that very topic.
Very quickly before we go, have you published 32 books?
I have.
Which is the 32nd?
This is the 32nd. Well, thank you for asking. It's slightly more if you include new editions, but this is the 32nd first edition of those I've done in first edition. Just out, Reform of the House of Lords. Reform of the
House of Lords, available from all good bookshops. Philip, thank you so much. We're going to have to stop there. Thank you very, very much. Here's Dan with all the latest sports news.
Hull City head coach Leonid Slutsky has no fresh injury worries going in tomorrow's trip to Reading. David Myler is expected to come into the starting 11 after scoring from the bench in last week's draw at Sunderland, while Fraser Campbell is also now fit enough to feature from the start. Centre-half Andrei Mazuch is available, having missed the last few weeks through injury. Here's the City boss Leonid Slutsky, who's been giving us an update on Fraser Campbell, who's also on his way back from injury.
I think he's ready because after injury first 2 matches he played, he could play only 20-25 minutes. Now much better because he had all this week full training session, and I think he's ready to play starting 11.
Elsewhere, Scunthorpe United host Portsmouth in League One tomorrow. Defender Charlie Good is the only fresh injury concern for Graham Alexander after picking up a knock in a behind closed doors game earlier in the week. Grimsby Town travel to Newport County looking for their third win in a row. Tomorrow's hosts sit above the Mariners in 9th place, although they are level on points. A win could see Grimsby move into the playoff places, but Newport remain unbeaten at home this season. However, Paul Dixon feels that it's important that the Mariners capitalise on their chances and get off to a quick start in the game.
I think if we hadn't let in the goal when we did, I think we probably would have gave them maybe a couple more than what we did in the end, because we did start the game well. So we just need to keep going, keep doing that, and games starting well, keeping it tight at the back and taking our chances when they come along.
North Ferriby United are in action tomorrow too. They're away at Stockport County, kicking off at 3 o'clock. Rugby now, and Hull FC fight to keep their season alive tonight when they travel to Castleford. The Black and Whites must beat the league leaders to finish in the top 4 and qualify for the end of season playoffs. Chris Green is Lee Radford's only addition from last week's win over Wakefield. He's in place of Jordan Thompson, and Radford's been speaking about his experience of this stage of the season, looking back on his grand final win with Bradford back 12 years ago.
2005 in particular, I think we went on a 13-game winning run when we came from 5th. I think that was the lowest position to win it, up until a couple of seasons ago. So, yeah, you just have that feeling that the ball's rolling, I think.
And kick-off tonight is at 8 o'clock. Meanwhile, Hull Kingston Rovers finish their Super 8 qualifiers campaign tomorrow. They're at Warrington Wolves in a game between the two promoted sides. Tim Sheens has made 4 changes, with Jamie Ellis, Maurice Blair, Lee Jewett and Thomas Minns all coming in. And finally, it's good luck to Hull boxer Luke Campbell, who could become the city's first ever male world boxing champion in the early hours of Sunday morning. He'll fight Venezuelan veteran Jorge Linares for the WBA World Lightweight Championship in Los Angeles. And that's all for the sport.
Thanks very much, Dan. That's it for tonight. My thanks to Lord Norton for going through the local papers. If you have a news story, then please visit our Facebook or Twitter pages, email news@estuary.tv or phone Grimsby 01472315553, or write to us at Estuary TV, Nuns Corner, Grimsby, North East Lincolnshire, DN34 5BQ, the old-fashioned way. Until Monday, from all of us here, have a great weekend. Good evening.